That there is Master H with Dance Around Together, and before that gave you something from Fusion 5 Manguiro Mistake. I'll time it exactly a few seconds. A few seconds left. I just want to say the correct time here so that I don't, feel like I've eaten into more blessings time. But yes, our time at exactly 7:30. You're listening to my station, your station, ZiFM Stereo. Good evening and welcome to Backstage, the space where stories come alive, where artists, thinkers, and creators share the journeys behind their work. I'm your host, Patience Musa. Always such an honor to come through on Tuesday evenings and just tell you what's up as far as the arts space is concerned. And tonight, we step into the world of history, identity, and imagination with a guest whose writing invites us to rethink everything we think we know about Zimbabwe's past. My guest is Joern Stoevring. Did I pronounce it right?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Now, Joern is a writer, researcher, and a deep thinker whose latest book, The Cradle of Zimbabwe, Paradigm Lost, is already stirring conversation and curiosity. And so we're going to be finding out a lot more about that book. If you do have any questions at all, send them through to our WhatsApp 0772168045. So grab a cup of coffee, cup of tea. Yes, it's that time of the year. A little nippy at the moment. And if you are driving, drive cautiously, drive to arrive, but don't touch that dial as we go behind the scenes and get to find out more about this book, The Cradle of Zimbabwe, Paradigm Lost. It's such an evocative title. What does the phrase paradigm lost mean in the context of your book? And why was it important to challenge existing narratives?
One of the major reasons, and thank you for the question, I wrote this book, is that in the history education in Zimbabwe, the history starts with the early Bantu. All respect to them, but there are 10,000 years before the early Bantu arrived, and their way of living, there is written in stone. And the stones, based on no less than 18,000 pictures from 38 caves all over the country, I tried to decipher the meaning, and I had a completely different take on what's important in life. The San, who were the original inhabitants of Zimbabwe, their take was that they relate to the spirit animals, and over the thousands of years they also developed to relate to a shaman, to relate to the spirit animals. And when they had sickness, when they wanted to achieve things, when they were not lucky in game, they tried to address those spirits which was inside the stones. The spirits were not in the heaven, they were inside the stones. And their magnificent paintings are different and much more interesting than in South Africa, where normally there is one layer for the last 500 years. In Zimbabwe, there are up to 5 layers. And the 5 layers depict a development in their concepts, in their spiritual development, which is not written into the books yet.
And are you able to give us a brief overview of the book and what inspired you to write it?
Well, a brief overview of the book can be encapsulated in a few major points, which is that Zimbabwean rock art is unique in Southern Africa and much more elaborate than in South Africa. In South Africa, it's a big magnet for tourism. It's a big magnet for. There are 2 research professors. In Zimbabwe, there is not the same backup. In South Africa, they're all fenced and there are guides. In Zimbabwe, not a single cave is fenced, not a single guide. The history educator spoke to history teachers who are staying close to the caves. They're not using the cave in their education. There's a big opportunity for Zimbabwe as a state, both in terms of economy and in terms of taking back 10,000 years. It's quite a lot.
It is.
It's quite an inheritance. It's an unbelievable jewel of spiritual thoughts, which are set in stone, even though it's on the stone. But the rock art of Zimbabwe is truly magnificent.
And so you weave together history, myth, as well as personal reflection in your writing. How do you strike the balance between storytelling and scholarship?
Well, I have allied with international expertise. An international professor in anthropology. I've interacted with him for my approach. But it's not so much storytelling as actually scholarship work. With a base of 32 walls, I have a base which is quite different from the ones who go out and see a single tableau and then interpret it from what they can see. Because the layers are talked about, the first layers you cannot see with the eye. There's apps called D-Stretch, which augment small grains of color so you can see the first colors. And in my book, which has exactly the title you mentioned, and which is available at simbaharare@gmail.com, I present the evidence, and it has attracted international interest. Much more than in Zimbabwe, though. But from South Africa to Europe to metropolitan centers in America, I am discussing the content, and they are acknowledging the provision to the history of Zimbabwe.
And how does your book reshape historical and narratives about Zimbabwe's origins?
The fact is that the 10,000 years of San occupancy of the area of Zimbabwe, it was different tribes, and there was a spiritual development in different parts of the country, and their interaction with the early Bantu. Some places it went well. One can see on the pictures that they cooperated in concepts, and other caves, the caves were just taken over, and the caves had a different function to just being grand presentations of large-scale pictures. It also served at the social cohesion of the San. So when the early Bantu came and took over the caves, they actually, in some cases, cooperated and incorporated key spiritual thinking, like a snake with an antelope head, which is still discussed in the area of Natopo. And other places, in other caves, they occupied the cave and destroyed that part of the San. It was like a new power, new sheriff was in town, and that history also has to be told.
And whilst you were working on this book, what were some of the most surprising or even unsettling discoveries you made? Were there any?
There are two major discoveries, beyond the fact that I have discovered more than 50 sites which are unknown. I went to a special district called Shokwe, close to south of Mandara, and spent 6 months there. I was shown around by the local people to all, and it's completely overfilled with rock art. So not only the ones who are known in the tourist and internet, the country of Zimbabwe just flourishes and has an abundance of smaller sites and bigger sites. So there is an intensity in how they painted. It's not only the caves. Some were at the end of giant boulders, and others you could not even have the ritual dance in front of, which is a normal explanation, the trance theory, you know. So the major new discoveries, the layers, up to 5 layers, and the 5 layers can show the development of the thought, and 2, the grand compositions. In South Africa and other places, it's mainly a tableau with people or beings relating to a higher being or animal. But for example, Dengeni is 10 meter long, 2 meters wide. Gulubahu outside Matopo is at the same dimensions. It's a cosmology. It's not only a single tableau, as you can see in a painter. It's a simple cosmology which is demonstrated to the people. A cosmology which is a world view. And this is just to come and see. And both of them has very few visitors. 2 days ago, I went with a friend to a place here in Harare with a fantastic boulder, and our owners told me it's out on Airport Road, that it's 6 years ago the last visitor was there, and I was that last visitor.
Wow. You know, I had a friend who had a house in that Hatfield area as well, near Airport Road, who had this yard. They had these rocks, and there were also paintings on these rocks, and you could tell that they were very, 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 very old. So,
If they're repairing cars at that yard, it's the same place.
oh yeah,
Did they do that?
I think it could be very
Yes.
well be the same place.
It's completely overgrown and that way protected, but it is a jewel.
Yeah, it is. Our time at exactly 18 minutes to the hour 8 here on my station, your station, ZiFM Stereo. This is Backstage. And this evening, we are having a mind-expanding conversation with the author of The Cradle of Zimbabwe, Paradigm Lost, Joern Stoevring. And if you do have any questions at all, again, the number to use is 0772 168 045. Now, there's often a tension between Western interpretations of African history and local oral traditions. How does your book navigate this space?
Well, it is a very precise, as you say, often a contradiction. But the problem in Zimbabwe is that there are only 1,000 sand left, and they are close to Tsozoloto, outside Bulawayo. I went there 2 weeks and stayed there and talked to them and showed them my pictures in order to get their response on my interpretation. But the present-day San is not the same as that time San, of course. The interpretation of that time is in the rock, at the rock. And it is, I also allies with local scholars like Dr. Namo and others who have written extensively in the area. I don't see a division between international and local scholars for Savit. There is, on the contrary, quite a common approach. And what I think in relation to both nationally and international I can contribute is what I said, the layers. Because I'm not going to criticize others. I'll just say that there is a huge gold mine, spiritual gold mine, to be investigated. And my book, which is approved by the Ministry of Education to be used in the schools up to university level, they went through each page, in fact, ends with questions of each of the chapters. And the idea by the questions is that in school, they can question my book. So the idea is that the children who unfortunately today do not value this incredible inheritance can take ownership of it and question my book and my interpretation. So the questions after each chapter is made to make the discussions in schools and up to university easier. I open a platform for dialogue and discussion of my own work. I do not claim it's the final word, but I think there's good reason to discuss it.
Well, maybe we could talk about the writing process. If you could tell us about your writing process, did you have a clear structure from the beginning, or did the book evolve as you wrote it?
The book took me 6 years to write.
Wow.
It taken me a lot of expeditions to 32 caves, and some of them are very difficult to get, and some of them I had to take 5 expeditions before I found them. Some of the best, like the Antelope Cape in Lake Tivero, nobody knows it anymore. I had to use colonial maps to find it. The rangers doesn't know the existence anymore. I started with writing this because the older platform is Professor Garlach's work from 1995. He was a Zimbabwean who became professor in Zimbabwe and wrote, based on the trance approach, an interpretation of the caves. And what happened is I visited Domboshava cave and saw one of his descriptions, and I disagreed. So as Danish, you're used to follow your own instinct. You do not follow what
Everybody else.
or what government or whoever tells you. So that started that I had to be true to my own observations. And from that it just evolved. I needed to update and I needed to see all these places. And it, as I said, was not easy always, but the process evolved and then I had to present it. The interaction with the Minister of Information was fruitful. Forgive me for saying so, but at least that part of the state functions. And our interaction was fruitful, and they were interacted, and the director of the ministry even wrote a foreword so that it should not be any doubt that they put value on my work.
And so you said you worked on this book for 6 years. It probably means that you put together, the work you put together was overwhelming. How did you then decide what to include and what to leave out?
It's a wonderful question. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I have 7,000 images, high peak.
Wow.
And I use these threads, and that creates 5 times more. So the selection, I had to prioritize it. So I prioritized it as a director for the National Gallery asked me to do, to present pictures which says more than 1,000 words, or to give them a journey back in time. Because I chose the last thing, to present in the book the journey back in time, to give the development of their thoughts. But still, I am left with a challenge also to show the fantastic pictures as they are. And there are elements of it too in the book, but I prioritized to describe how their spiritual thoughts developed through the thousands of years, instead of only showing the last picture. I also have some of them, but that must be for another book or somebody else to do.
Now, having worked on this book for so long, you must be passionate about this particular topic. Did you feel somewhat personal connection to the land, or to the paintings themselves, or even to the forgotten stories?
The forgotten stories is a fantastic word. And some of the forgotten stories is when human and animals were painted as as equals. Today it's a fantastic thought that you can be equal with the animals we slaughter and eat, which were valued and not put under you in the rank. And some, in the beginning, they even looked up to the strengths of rhinoceros and other qualities of the animals because they were primary hunters. And as a hunter, they had to value that quality as the animals. So that is a forgotten story of the time we were equal with the animals. The San did not recognize ownership of the land. They shared around the fire, and they typically, except in the great caves where they stayed, were changing habitat. So it gives a glimpse into a past which might also be the future. If one does not think that it is such a strange thought that we have to take care and value the animals, it can give directions also to the future. After all animal habitats of the globes are dying.
Well, at time at 9 minutes to the hour 8, if you're just tuning in, we're my station, your station, ZiFM Stereo. Totally enjoying the show today because I've always loved history, and I'm hoping that if you're listening right now, you are learning something, and hopefully it'll make you want to research a little bit more, maybe get your hands on this book. Thank you very much for all your messages that you're sending through. Got a message from Nyasha Tota. How you doing, Nyasha? How's your week going? Zimbe from Nyazura says hi, patient, and Mr. Joern. How can we get this book? Thanks for the work you're doing. Yeah, and that's Zimbe listening in from Nyazura. Quickly, maybe you could tell us again. I know you'd mentioned it before. If you could quickly tell us again how people can get their hands on this book.
The easiest is to write to me an email to Simpa Harare, SEMPA Harare like a Harare, at gmail.com.
Oh, great. And okay, so you're a historian. You love to read a lot. You probably have some writers or historians or thinkers who influenced this particular book. Who influenced which writers, which thinkers?
I think all who work with Sandrock art basically love Garlock, the one I just criticized. He was, as should be allowed to make mistakes, but he was open to ideas, and he tried to develop his own approach, and he was also critical of the trans thesis, which has shown such perseverance in South Africa. I do not disagree with the trans thesis, that it is important. Of course, they tried to go into trance in order to connect to the spirit animals, but it is a part of the cosmology. It's not the total story. It forms a part of the cosmology, which also contain other elements, like a view of, like an island view of how the world was composed. After all, they were on an island, so to speak, for 10,000 years. So I am influenced by everybody, but I have a valued contribution such that I think that the cosmology, to see the cosmology, to see the 10 times 2 meter long images cannot fit into a single concept like the trans theory or how a single person relate to one spirit animals. There are other elements in it, like the structure of the edge of the universe, like how they separate the spirit beings in a separate sphere from their daily living, and how they develop from addressing a spirit animal to a spirit person.
And so, with this book, what conversations do you hope you will ignite amongst your readers, um, especially those that may not have any interest, in these paintings or know anything about them?
In the heritage of Zimbabwe, it should, to the best of my opinion, also the opinion of the ministry, form part of their history. It is part of their history. And it is not a boring history. It is a fantastic history. It's a fantastic story. And some of the paintings, from a clearly artistic view, which I have not talked about yet, but the artistic splendor of the construct are fantastic. And the way they put layer upon layer is mind-blowing, to tell you the truth. And a lot of the local artists, to the best of my opinion, could learn a lot from their constructions. And the children could learn from the history caves close to them. And they should also earn income by being guides for tourists. And there's a message to everybody. The nation of Zimbabwe is bigger and encompass more people than who is just now, today in Zimbabwe. It has a depth in history that stretches back.
And in this age of rapid modernization and digital culture, why is it still important, perhaps more than ever, to engage with ancient history and heritage?
Because in this modern age, it is sometimes to be as in a box. And if one looks back to ancient history, they were thinking sometimes outside the box. There were other spiritual views which might not be so wrong as far as they can open areas one should attend to, as I said about the animals and how you relate to animals. In our present culture, you don't relate to animals, they are more or less things. The way you relate to other people is, of course, intense, but it could also be widened out. The world could be widened out to encompass the nature, the environment, the animals, the birds, and the stars.
And so, if you could leave your readers and, of course, our audience with one takeaway from the Cradle of Zimbabwe Paradigm Lost, what would it be?
It would be go and see it. Go and see it yourself and challenge my book if you like. You are most welcome.
And so that brings us to the end of tonight's conversation on Backstage. A huge thank you to my guest, Joern Stoevring, for taking us on that fascinating journey through time, truth, and the shifting sands of history. The Cradle of Zimbabwe Paradigm Lost is more than just a book. It's a mirror. It's a question mark, and perhaps even a call to action. And it reminds us that our past is not a closed chapter at all, but an open invitation to seek, to question, to embrace, to reclaim. And so thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you, Joern, for coming through.
Thank you, my dear. The way you formulate it is fantastic.
Thank you
Just
very
talent.
Thank you very much. And thank you for tuning in. Look, tune in next week, same time, right here on ZiFM Stereo. And you can watch this show on YouTube. Just look out for the ZiFM Stereo channel. Otherwise, you can hang with me Sunday morning from 6 a.m. through to 10 a.m. My name is Patience Musa. This is your evening. This is your day. This is your week. This is your month. So you go ahead, claim it, take it, own it, and rock it.